all seen what happened out on the scene. Bill is being charged with criminal vehicular operation, which is going to be 10 years in jail, up to $20,000 fine. DWI in the 4th or 3rd degree, open bottle, minor possession, minor consumption, reckless driving, careless driving, and the charges could go on from there depending on who else is hurt. This is going to affect his life for a long time. If Phil's a hunter, it's out the window. You can't hunt. If he wants to get a job, who's going to want to hire a felon when in this economy there's a million people looking for jobs and there's 5 Phils and this Phil has a felony? So that's all out the window. And something as small as what he did today is going to have an effect on the rest of his life. I mean, and 18 years old, it isn't worth it. Emma died in the helicopter, so that's another charge that'll be added on to his. And one of the unfortunate parts about our job, and you guys are young enough, you don't have to think about it. I have kids. Officer Belloc has kids. The worst part about this job is when he got in this accident, Emma died. I have to go, or Officer Belloc has to go, or Chief Ide has to go knock on Emma's mom's door and explain why her daughter ain't coming home. And whether it be at midnight or 1 o'clock, there's not one conversation that I want to have with anyone. I mean, I can't imagine if that was my kids, and it's just not a conversation you want to have. That's how I go and knock on her door, explain to them what happened to their daughter and why that she's not going to be coming home. And no matter what we tell them, they're not going to like hear. I mean, they'll get mad at us, they'll hit us, they go through every stage of grief that you can imagine, grieving. And that's all, and he's going to have to live with that for the rest of his life on his conscience.
It not only affects him, it affects the family of the people that died, and it also affects the whole entire community. You know, I've known somebody who's died from drunk driving before. I've had a family member, a sister that died from a drunk driver. It affects everybody in the community. Just from the funeral, you know, Emma probably babysat somebody's kids, it affects their family, it affects everybody. So don't make stupid decisions. There's other ways to have fun without driving.
My homecoming year, my senior year, I was hit by a drunk driver. I was fortunate I didn't get hurt. And homecoming year for my brother, my middle brother Chad, he was hit by a drunk driver. So 2 of my brothers, don't think it's not going to happen to you. Because, I mean, whether you're drinking or somebody else is drinking, I mean, look at, he hit a car full of his friends. So it is possible. And I didn't get hurt, I was fortunate. My brother rolled his car 3 times and he was able to walk away. We've had luck on our side on that end of it. But it don't always work the way. The 2 girls that were hit by the drunk driver, it's going to affect their family, and they're walking away from this. Their mom and dad are going to be rattled. They're not going to want to let them drive after 8 o'clock. Once it's dark, they're going to want their kids home. It just has drastic effects. So think before you do stuff. I mean, especially if it's getting warm out and you guys are going to want to be out and doing things. There's other things to do than drink. You've made it 17 or 18 years or 15 years without drinking, and you've had fun doing that. Think of other ways to enjoy your summer and prom. Thank you.
Hey Mom, I went to that party and I remember what you said. You told me not to drink, so I had a spray instead. I felt proud of myself, the way you said I would, that I didn't drink, though some of my friends said I should. I made a healthy choice, and your advice to me was right. When the party finally ended, the kids drove out of sight. We got into my car, sure to get home in one piece. I never knew it was coming. Mom, something unexpected least. Now I'm lying on the hood, and I hear the policeman say, "The kid that caused the wreck was drunk, Mom." His voice seems so far away. My own blood's all around me as I try hard not to cry. I hear the paramedics say, "This girl is going to die." I'm sure the guy had no idea why he was flying high. Because he chose to drink and drive, now I would have to die. So why do people do it, Mom, knowing it ruins lives? And now the pain is stabbing me like 100 knives. Tell sisters not to be afraid. Tell Daddy to be brave. And when I go to heaven, put Mommy's girl on my grave. Someone should have taught him that it was wrong to drink and drive. Maybe if his parents had, I'd still be alive. My breaths are getting shorter, Mom. I'm getting really scared. These are my final moments, and I am so unprepared. I wish you could hold me, Mom, as I lay here and die. I wish I could say I love you, Mom. So I love you, and goodbye.
Say not in grief that they were no more, but say in thankfulness that they were. A death is not the extinguishing of light, but the putting out of the lamp, because the dawn has come. The Bauer and McNamer families and the Hoff Funeral Home want to thank each and every one of you for being present here this afternoon to celebrate the lives of two young women who tragically have been taken from us, their families, friends, and classmates. My name is John Wagoner, and I'm a certified funeral celebrant. In this position, I'm able to share with you both the personal and the social significance of what Emma and Sierra meant to each one of you. It is my hope this afternoon and every day that will follow, that we will find time to laugh, to share, and to cry. I believe in death, there comes new life. Even in our grief, we are gifted with many opportunities. Memories are awakened and friendships renewed. The purpose of this celebration is to provide an opportunity to acknowledge the loss that we're all experiencing and to respond to the many changes that will take place in your lives following the death of these two young women. The celebration of life is our way of saying thank you to Emma and to Sierra for having lived their lives with us. It is an act of love on your part. We mourn for those we love. Death always seems to take each and every one of us by surprise. Death exemplifies how fragile life is and how quickly, in a flash, it can be taken from each one of us. Whenever someone dies, we too die a little. Death brings sadness. An area of life, a familiar voice, footsteps, shared memories have suddenly disappeared from our lives and can never be recreated. This truly is a day to remember, to share, and to support each one of yourselves. I began the celebration with an untitled poem written by an unnamed mother who lost two of her own daughters in an alcohol-related car automobile accident. Its essence and its power lies in the knowledge that in these senseless deaths, resulting in almost unbearable darkness, light from a morning's dawn and forgiveness from a mother will bring healing. Despite hoping and knowing that time heals all ills, we cannot help but ask, but why? Why has this happened? Why has life all of a sudden become so unfair in each of our lives to cut the lives of two great young women so short? Their lives were filled with hope and promises. Life does have so much to offer. And we know that Emma and Sierra would have been a great part of that life. We simply don't know why God allows this to happen. God gives each one of us free will, and we use that free will. Because of this freedom, our lives are filled with so much good, but often with so much anger and tragedy. Emma and Sierra's lives ended way too soon. They had a lot to offer. What gifts and talents had they not yet shared with you, with their families? What future lied ahead for them? They will never have that opportunity. They will never have that opportunity to see them and their potential. Our children and grandchildren will never have the opportunity to call them mother and grandmother. They no longer will be able to marry. They no longer will have children and grandchildren of their own. These questions that we can ask all day long will never have answers for us. But to their families and to you, I can only say that I feel your pain. Some things in life are just not the way they should be. Because life really isn't that way. And I think you're all aware of that. Whether it's on the football field, the basketball court, whatever it is, life never turns out the way you always want it to. The prophet Isaiah says, "For one who dies at 100 years will be considered a youth." Isaiah holds out a vision for each one of us. No one will die before savoring all that life has to offer them. We hear this in these words. "Lo, I am about to create new heavens and a new earth. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and exult in my people. Ours will become a full lifetime. He who dies a merry youth, who reaches but 100 years, and he who fails short of 100 years has been accursed. For a race blessed by the Lord are they and their offspring. Before they call, I will answer. While they are not yet speaking, I will hearken to them. The wolf and the lamb shall graze alike, and the lion shall eat hay like the ox. None shall hurt or destroy all on my mountain, says the Lord." For unbearable pain, peace, and harmony will eventually come. Now the work is left to us, the living, to carry forth the beauty and the joy of those that have now fallen. Where we weep, Emma and Sierra would have us laugh. Where we mourn, they would have us rejoice. But we know that they will forgive us in our grief. For to grieve is to love, and to love is to cherish. And to cherish is to give praise and thanksgiving for those lives that have blessed us all. This double tragedy that we have now experienced will become a part of our memories. Your grief will be a journey full of rest stops and potholes. But remember, grief is not an illness, nor is it a destination, but simply a passage from anger and hurt to healing. It is a necessary ingredient that we must all consume when we go through a loss. We live on in two ways. We live on in eternal life with our Creator, and we live on in the lives and memories of those we have loved. But remember, no one is dead until they are forgotten. A number of years ago, I had a first cousin who died after 15 years with MS. He was not as young as Emma and Sierra, but young enough to miss seeing his older daughter graduate from medical school, and his youngest from graduating from high school. My aunt, his mother, sent me a thank you note after I had sent her a sympathy card, and these were the simple words that were on that card. Some people are bound to die young. By dying young, a person stays young in people's memories. If he burns or she burns brightly before they die, that brightness will share all the time. We now come to the close of our celebration. Today we have celebrated the lives of two wonderful people, two wonderful young women. We will remember their many successes in life, and maybe just like we remember our own, some of the human failures that we all have. But we do know that their true success in life is the love they gave each and every one of you, and the love that you have returned to them. Thank you.
like to thank you all for coming here today to remember my sweet daughter, Emma. I never thought in a million years that I would be burying my child. Life can change in an instant. Emma is my firstborn daughter. What joy I felt when I first held her in my arms. She's my friend and a huge joy in my life. Emma had such a big heart. She was like the second mom in our family. Emma was a planner and organizer, and what big plans she had. She wanted to become a social worker. Our family did foster care for many years, which gave her a very close-up look at the needs of many children. She always embraced and loved each and every child that came to our home, no matter how hard they were to love. Emma was also the best sister to her siblings. I'm not sure how her brother and sisters will ever get over losing her, especially in such a senseless way. It's ironic that Emma was killed in a crash caused by a drunk driver. She was involved in many groups in school, but was most passionate about SAD, Students Against Destructive Decisions. She was an officer and very active member. Emma believed that drugs and alcohol were not a good option for anyone. I didn't know if I would be able to stand up here and speak today, but I knew for Emma and Sierra that I needed to. I worked on many traumas during my time working in the ER at the hospital. I've seen firsthand the devastating effects one wrong decision can make. I don't think people, especially kids, fully understand how permanent death is until it's too late. Even now, it's hard to believe that we won't see Emma and Sierra again. So please, think hard before making a choice that could affect you and others forever. I pray that all of you fully understand that Emma and Sierra's deaths could have been avoided if the driver of the other car had made the right decision not to drink. There is no easy way to say goodbye to my beloved Emma. I don't wish this on any other family. So good night and goodbye for now, my sweet girl. We will love you always.
I wasn't sure how I was going to start this message to you today. So I'll start that I started working here about 2.5 years ago. And during the moments that Mr. McBroom and Mrs. Helgamo and I are talking about school, we talk about our families and some of the ways that we grew up. And from those conversations, Mr. McBroom learned something of my past and asked me to speak to you. He asked this about a couple of weeks ago, and I went home and I thought about it. And I'll be honest with you and tell you that that entire weekend, I was an emotional wreck. Although my story is very important, I wasn't sure that I wanted to tell any of you. I changed my mind probably about 2 or 3 dozen times. But ultimately, here I stand in front of you to share one of the very personal stories that happened in my family. I wrote this autobiography about 18, 19 years ago when I decided to go back to college. It's entitled The One and Only Night, autobiography by Christine Dravis Murley. I was 11 years old when my brother Tim, my dad, and I were in the backyard at our farm. I was shooting basketballs as my father was sprawled out on the ground. My dad was coaching me how to be a great basketball player. The springtime kittens were exploring my dad's large structure in the grass. The kittens tumbled to the ground, but continued to crawl all over him. Tim stood before my father and shyly asked if he could go to a movie with my cousin and friends that evening. Dad hesitated, but agreed to let Tim go. However, my dad laid down the rules for the evening because it was the first time that brother had ever gone out with friends alone. Tim left that night. I remember peeking out the kitchen windows to share some of his excitement for his first times out alone without my parents. I noticed the leaves flutter and they shine brightly in the outside farmlight from the small rainfall that evening. Tim seemed to skip happily into the darkness for his first chance to finally escape the watchful eyes of my parents. He jumped into the Jeep full of friends and away they went. I was so incredibly jealous that I wasn't old enough to go with him. The next morning, my sister ran into my bedroom shouting, "Tim's been in a car accident." I smiled to myself, thinking about the endless amount of tension that I would receive at school on Monday because of my brother's little fender bender. The thought that school could not start soon enough rushed through my mind. I was going to be quite popular on Monday because I would be riddled with questions about the accident. However, I didn't go to school that day. A few of the relatives stayed with my sister and me while we waited for my parents and Tim to come home from the hospital. My cousin and I laughed and played catch with the softball that afternoon. We had even gone to the nearby pond to play in the water with the frogs. It was a warm and sunny day. With all of the relatives around, it felt like a family reunion. The anticipation of waiting for my brother to come home seemed to wear on us all a little differently. My aunt sat in the lawn chair with a serious and concerned look on her face. She seemed to look off in an open field, but I didn't know why. I couldn't wait to see Tim. Did he break an arm or a leg? Did he get any cuts? How much trouble was Tim going to be in? And when was he coming home? Finally, late in the afternoon that day, I saw my parents and step-parents pull into the driveway. Tim wasn't with them, and I was very confused about that. They walked single file up the small embankment where I was waiting for them, my stepfather in front. "How's Tim?" I asked, with a big enthusiastic smile on my face. He didn't look at me, but rather at the ground, while shaking his head left and right. I knew at that moment that something was terribly wrong. A great panic of pain came over me as I searched my other parents' faces for some other sign. They only duplicated what my stepfather's actions. They didn't have to tell me. I knew that my brother wasn't going to come home. I lowered my head and I followed them into the house. Once in the house, my parents began arranging the funeral, and I observed my mother. Her tear-streaked face was worn and tired. She acted like I had never known her before, because at one moment she stared out the window with a blank look on her face, and the next moment she'd scream and bawl uncontrollably. I watched her face grow from red to redder, with anger at the thought that she would no longer see her son again. I was very confused and frightened, and at times I really didn't know what was going on. I kept thinking that Tim was going to walk through that door, but it never happened. A few days later was the family viewing with the open casket. understand everything. As I was 11 years old, I remember saying to myself, that boy in the casket wasn't my brother. This boy had a huge head, and he didn't have any facial features as my brother Tim. This boy had a chubby face, so it couldn't have been my brother. I even told my mother that it wasn't Tim. I couldn't even recognize my own brother. My mother assured me that, unfortunately, it was indeed Tim, and tried to explain the mystery to me. I was told that on the night that my brother died, Tim had said that he and his friends were going to the movies. Instead, they decided to go to a popular teenage spot in a wooded area in a nearby town. His group of friends had a few beers that night. As they were leaving, the driver of the Jeep had sped up to an estimated 80 miles an hour, not realizing that there was a 90-degree turn in the gravel road. The automobile flipped several times down the large embankment. Tim was tossed from the Jeep, and he was thrown over 50 yards in the air. It was assumed that my brother's head was struck by the roll bar on the Jeep, or he landed on his head and hit either a rock or a pole or a tree. I was later told by my aunt that when my parents were looking at my brother's x-rays, she described to me that his skull was in so many pieces, it looked like a puzzle. And with the injuries and the extreme swelling in his head, my brother was left brain dead. My parents were left with the decision to either keep my brother's body alive or let him go. I realized at some point that maybe it was my brother in the casket across the room in the funeral parlor. So I took another look. He was dressed in the baby blue suit that I remembered seeing at home hanging in the closet. Something inside of me had to believe my mother's words that it was my brother Tim. As we were beginning to leave the funeral parlor, I watched my dad say goodbye to my brother alone. I had snuck around the door of the viewing room. He kissed my brother and cried uncontrollably while asking the same question over and over again. Why? The sobs for my dad made my heart drop to the floor. I couldn't swallow the lump in my throat as the tears formed in my eyes. I cried for my father's pain. I wanted to run to him and tell him that things were going to be all right. But how could they? Watching my dad that day was the most painful memory in my life. This is the first time I saw my dad cry, and I never wanted to see it again. As I wondered now about the accident, I wonder why Tim's death happened to my family. We lived in a small 1,600-person community. Why my brother? Was it some type of punishment that God had passed on us? What did we do to make God mad? As I look back at that time of my life, I realized that if I'd known how serious the accident was, I wouldn't have laughed and played out in the sun that day. I have often felt very guilty and ashamed by my actions of that day, but I also understand that I was very young. I was a 5th grader. Can any of you imagine losing a sibling at age 11? I had never experienced death before. No one ever told me that I would never see my big brother again. I miss my brother. I think of him constantly. There's a few of you that actually remind me of my brother. A few months before my brother passed away, my brother and I were in my parents' bedroom, and we were laying on our stomachs, and we were watching TV. And I, as an 11-year-old, was goofing off, and I would roll over top of him, and I'd roll across the other side, and I'd roll on the other side. And at some point, I rested on top of him, like this, on top of him. And I remember smelling his hair. Every once in a while, I smell that smell, and it's in my own son's hair. I can't smell that scent in any of my other children's hair. It's in my oldest, who's now a 5th grader. He's the exact same age today that I was when I lost my brother, and it breaks my heart. Tim was a cool brother, and I really looked up to him. I adored him. He stood up for people, and he didn't let anybody bully his sister. He saved that for himself. And he was an awesome, awesome wrestler. His coach felt that he could have made it to the state tournament every year in wrestling. But I never got to grow up with him. I never got to see him stand on the podium at the state wrestling tournament. I never got to see him graduate high school or college. I never got to see him get married. I never got to know how many more nieces and nephews that I would have from him. I never got to see what kind of work he would be doing, or if we would even be still close. And I wonder about my kids. I know he would have loved him. The list of questions of this is endless, but I will never know. 1 week from today, Friday, May 3rd, my brother will be gone for 33 years. The pain never goes away. There's always a lot of good memories, but the pain is always there. And all of this pain was caused by drinking and driving. Tim was 14 years old. The driver was 16 years old. He literally walked away from the accident. Not a broken arm, not a broken leg, not even a cut. If you think you're invincible, you're not. I will be the first person to tell you that. If you think things can't or won't happen to you from drinking and driving, I'm going to be the first person to tell you that they can. If you think it's just your life, and we shouldn't take your keys away from you when you're drunk, I'm going to be the first person who grabs them from you. Take a look around. Chances are you're probably sitting next to your best friend. Can you imagine your life without them? Don't drink and drive. It's not only your life, but other lives that you can kill. my brother's friend killed my brother. Be that person to tell your friends that you aren't going to drink and drive. I realize at the mock crash today that some of you may or may not have taken it very seriously. And I did see a few of you laughing and joking around. But for a moment, just for a second, pretend that this could have been a real accident and that you came upon it. How would you feel? Understand in some people's world, it is real. It is certainly a reality in my world. Please do everything that you can to not make it a reality in your world.
Now, today was an opportunity for us to experience as close to reality as possible. And since I've been here, I've preached and talked about making good choices. Throughout your life, throughout high school, as you become older, those temptations are going to present themselves to you. I can't be that person standing over your shoulder saying to make the right choice. Your teachers aren't able to. But most often or not, you're going to have one of your friends, or you're going to be a friend next to somebody that's about to make a poor choice. This was pretty hard. So I would just encourage you to make that choice, to take the keys away, to make a phone call. I don't think there's a whole lot more that I can say to drive home the message on top of what's already been said. With prom coming this weekend, and I know not everybody is going to be going to prom. Prom is an opportunity to get together with friends, go out to eat, dress up nicely, go through the Grand March, dance, and then we have parents that put together a post-prom party. The post-prom party is something that provides students an opportunity to go somewhere safe after the dance. I just really encourage all of you to make sure that you're making good choices. Because I'll admit, it's pretty hard for me to sit next to Ron down there and listen to what was going on. As a principal, it's the last thing that I'd like to have to deal with. So I'd encourage you again to just continue to make good choices. Each and every one of you is a good person. But you do have that opportunity to make a poor choice. So again, I'm going to say it just one last time. Step up when somebody's about ready to make a poor choice, whether it's you or a friend
or even somebody that maybe you don't think is your best friend. Do what you can to prevent unnecessary things from happening.